The morning started with a quiet heaviness that sat on his shoulders the moment he opened his eyes. He lay still for a few seconds, listening to the soft breathing of his little boy sleeping beside him, curled up like he always did when the nights felt colder. The small apartment was silent, almost too silent, reminding him once again that it was just the two of them now. He gently brushed a hand over his son's hair, whispered that he would be back soon, and slowly got out of bed. He moved around the room quietly, not wanting to wake the child. He got dressed quickly, slipping into the same black uniform shirt he had washed the night before and hung near the window to dry. It was still slightly damp, but he didn't have time to worry about that. His shift started early, and missing the bus meant losing an hour of work an hour he simply couldn't afford that. He placed a small note on the table, beside a bowl of cereal and a cup of milk covered with a plate to keep it cool. The note said he loved him and would be home soon. It was a simple routine, but it was one that kept them going. Outside, the air felt cooler than usual, rushing against his skin as he walked quickly toward the bus stop. He checked his pocket twice to make sure he had his bus card. The sky was still dark, with only a hint of light trying to break through. He carried the tiredness of someone who hadn't slept enough for many months, but he walked with the quiet strength of a father who didn't have any other choice. When the bus arrived, he took a seat near the window, resting his forehead lightly against the glass. Tall buildings passed by slowly, streetlights flickering, storefronts still closed. He tried not to think about the bills waiting at home, or the school expenses coming up next month. Instead, he focused on staying calm. One day at a time, one shift at a time. That by the time he reached the restaurant, the sun had started to rise. The warm yellow light spilled across the entrance as he pulled open the door and stepped inside. The familiar smell of fresh bread, hot coffee, and cleaning spray greeted him. It was comforting somehow. The restaurant wasn't fancy, but it was honest work, and he gave it everything he had. He slipped into the back room, tied his apron tightly around his waist, and pushed his hair back. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease that came with exhaustion. "Morning," a coworker said in passing. He smiled softly and nodded, not wanting to explain how little sleep he had gotten. Everyone had their own problems. He wasn't here to add to anyone's burden. The restaurant slowly filled with customers. He moved between tables with his usual care. He greeted guests politely, carried heavy trays, took orders with patience, and checked on everyone with small, gentle questions. "Do you need anything else? Is the food okay?" All while trying to ignore the tightness in his back and the dull ache running across his shoulders. By noon, the rush had begun. People entered in groups, business workers talking loudly, families placing complicated orders, couples asking for special changes. He handled it all without letting the pressure show. He never snapped, never rushed anyone, never showed frustration. He simply moved, table after table, doing his job with quiet dignity. Then the door opened again, and the atmosphere changed, but not in a loud way. It was subtle, like the air shifted a little. A man in a dark suit walked in, followed by another man who seemed to be his assistant. Their presence drew the attention of everyone nearby. Some recognized him. Some whispered. Some straightened their posture. A billionaire. A man whose face was often seen on news channels and magazine covers. A man known for huge companies, expensive cars, and deals that changed entire industries. The billionaire scanned the restaurant with cold eyes before taking a seat at one of the corner tables. The assistant stayed close behind him, holding a tablet and typing something quickly. The waiter took a slow breath. He didn't get nervous around people, not anymore. But this was different. Customers like this often came with expectations, impatience, and a sharp eye for mistakes. Still, he didn't let that stop him. Work was work, and he treated everyone the same. He walked over with steady steps. "Good afternoon. What can I get for you today?" The billionaire didn't look up. He simply said what he wanted in a clipped tone, like someone giving orders to a machine rather than speaking to another human. The assistant added a few more instructions. The waiter nodded politely, wrote everything down carefully, and returned to place the order. Throughout the next 30 minutes, he delivered water, checked the table, and brought the food exactly as requested. But the billionaire barely acknowledged him. No smile, no thank you, no eye contact. The assistant looked at him a few times, but even those glances felt heavy. The waiter kept doing his job. His hands moved calmly, but inside, he felt that same small knot he felt whenever someone treated him like he didn't exist. He was used to it, yes, but it still stung. He didn't show it, though. He never did. When the billionaire finished his meal, he stood up abruptly. The assistant placed a card on the table to pay, then stepped aside as the machine beeped. They didn't stay long after that. The billionaire left without a word. The assistant followed. The waiter walked toward the table once they were gone, taking a slow breath as he began to clear the plates. He had hoped just a little that the billionaire might have left something small as a tip, something to help with the groceries or his son's school supplies. Some people left nothing, but most left at least a little. But when he lifted the receipt, his stomach tightened. $0, nothing, not even a single coin. For a moment, he just stared at it. He didn't get angry. He didn't curse. He didn't blame anyone. He just felt that quiet sinking feeling inside, the same one he felt when the washing machine stopped working, or when the electric bill arrived higher than expected, or when his son asked for something small he couldn't afford. He placed the receipt down and sighed softly. Then he reached for the plate, the one the billionaire had used. The plate was heavier than expected, and when he lifted it, something thin slipped slightly underneath. His hand paused. There was a small folded paper under the plate. He blinked, confused. No one ever left notes like that. Tips, yes. Complaints, sometimes. But a folded note hidden under a plate? That was unusual. He looked around to see if anyone was watching him. No one was paying attention. The restaurant had returned to its steady lunchtime hum. People were talking, eating, laughing. Slowly, he picked up the folded note. It was simple white paper, neatly folded into a rectangle. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it. He expected something rude. A complaint. Maybe a message about poor service. Maybe someone mocking him. The world had taught him not to expect kindness from strangers, especially wealthy ones. But what he saw made him freeze. The handwriting was clean, sharp, almost careful. It said, "Not everything is as it seems. Look under table 12 after closing." He stared at the words for a long moment, unsure what to feel. Confusion, worry, curiosity, a strange calm mixed with a quiet fear. Why would anyone, especially a billionaire, leave something like this? He folded the note again, slipped it into his apron, and continued clearing the table with slow, thoughtful movements. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. He took orders. He served water. He delivered dishes. But his mind kept going back to that note. Why table 12? Why after closing? Why him? He had no answers, only questions. And deep inside his tired heart, something he hadn't felt in a long time, flickered quietly, something like hope, mixed with fear, mixed with the feeling that something important was about to happen. He didn't yet know that this day, which began like any other, would soon change everything. The note stayed in his pocket the rest of the day, folded neatly but heavy like a small stone. Every time he moved, he felt it brush against him, reminding him of the strange message written inside. He tried to focus on work, tried to stay present with each customer, But his mind kept drifting back to those few words. Not everything is as it seems. Look under table 12 after closing. He repeated the lines again and again, trying to understand what they meant. Was it a joke? A warning? A mistake? Maybe the note wasn't even meant for him. Maybe the billionaire had left it for someone else. But then, why hide it under a plate? Why fold it so carefully? Why leave it at all? By late afternoon, he was tired. His feet ached, his back hurt, and his eyes felt heavy from lack of sleep. But the thought of the note kept him alert. It sat inside him like a quiet whisper that refused to let go. As the last few customers left, the sun started to set outside the restaurant windows. The orange light fell across the floor like a warm blanket. He wiped down tables slowly, moving from one side of the room to the other. His coworkers chatted in the back, counting tips, planning their evenings, laughing softly. He listened without joining in. He didn't feel like talking. Not today. He waited for the final family to finish their meal, a couple with a child who kept dropping crayons. He smiled at the kid, picked up the crayons each time, and just kept working. When they finally left, he wished them a good night and began closing tasks, stacking chairs, sweeping the floor, wiping counters. Every now and then, he glanced at table 12. It looked completely normal. 4 chairs. Clean surface. Nothing unusual. He wondered again if he should even look under it. What if someone was playing a prank? What if there was nothing there? Or worse, what if it was something that could get him into trouble? He didn't need trouble. His life was already full of enough struggles, but something inside him refused to ignore it. He didn't believe in luck, but he did believe in signs. And this note felt like one. When the restaurant finally emptied, his manager walked out with a wave. "Lock up when you're done." He nodded. "Will do." The door clicked shut behind the manager, leaving him alone in the quiet space. The kitchen lights hummed softly. The chairs stood neatly on their tables. The floor smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. He took off his apron, folded it, and placed it on the counter. For a moment, he stood still, listening to his own breathing. Then he slowly walked toward table 12. His heart started beating a little faster with each step. Not in fear, just uncertainty. The kind of feeling that sits deep in your chest when something unknown is waiting. He reached the table and knelt down. At first, he saw nothing but the smooth underside of the wooden surface. Then he leaned further, using his phone flashlight to check again. That was when he noticed a small corner of paper taped near the back. His breath caught. There was something. The note hadn't been a prank. With shaking fingers, he reached under and peeled off the tape. The paper was folded in the same careful way as the first one. Plain, white, simple. He sat on the floor for a moment, holding it tightly. He didn't know if opening it would change anything, but he knew he had to. He unfolded it slowly. Inside was another short message. "Take this envelope from the counter drawer before you leave. It belongs to you." His brows furrowed. The counter drawer? The small drawer next to the register? The one where they kept spare pens and old menus? Why would anything inside belong to him? He stood up quickly and walked toward the front counter. His hands felt cold even though the restaurant wasn't. He reached for the drawer handle and pulled it open. Inside, on top of the pens and paper clips, was a sealed envelope. His name wasn't written on it, but it was the only envelope there. Plain white, thick, slightly heavy. His throat tightened. He picked it up gently, as if it might break. Before opening it, he looked around the restaurant again, half expecting someone to appear, half expecting the billionaire to walk in again. But no one was there. It was just him in the quiet room. He slowly opened the envelope. A letter slipped out first. He unfolded it with careful hands. The handwriting was the same. You don't know me. But I've been watching this place for a while. Not for food. Not for business. For people. He frowned, not fully understanding it. Some time ago, I heard you on the phone. You were trying to calm your child while hiding your own stress. I recognized that tone. I recognized the struggle. His chest tightened. He remembered that day. He had stepped into the back hallway to talk to his child who was upset about school. He thought no one had noticed. I grew up with a parent who worked long hours just to keep the lights on. People saw the success later in my life, but they never saw the years before it, the nights of hunger, the days of uncertainty, the quiet fear of losing everything. He swallowed hard. He could almost imagine the billionaire writing the words, remembering his past. I wanted to help you without embarrassing you. People can be quick to judge kindness, especially in public. They twist it. So I chose this way instead. His eyes moved slowly down the page. Inside, this envelope is something that may help you breathe a little easier. It is not charity. It is a reminder that people can rise, even from the darkest places. Consider it a step, not a solution. His hands shook slightly. He reached into the envelope again. There was a folded document, a check dot or something official. He stared at it for a long moment without breathing. It didn't matter what the exact amount was or what the papers meant, not yet. What mattered was the gesture, the hidden note, the quiet kindness, the unexpected hope. He sat down behind the counter slowly, feeling his legs weaken. He read the letter again. Every line felt heavier the second time. Someone had seen him. Someone had noticed the weight he carried. Someone had understood. He wasn't invisible. He wasn't alone in the world. He placed the letter on the counter and let out a shaky breath. Part of him wanted to cry. Part of him wanted to laugh. Part of him just wanted to go home and hold his child. But before he could move, he noticed one more line at the bottom of the letter. If you want to talk, I'll return tomorrow at noon. His heart jumped. Tomorrow? Why tomorrow? What more could the billionaire want? Why return at all? He didn't have answers. Only questions. But for the first time in a very long time, he felt something warm in his chest, something like light. He placed the check back into the envelope, carefully, and tucked it inside his pocket. Then he locked the restaurant doors, turned off the lights one by one, and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The streets were quiet. The sky was deep blue. The world felt different somehow, not fixed, not perfect, but lighter. On the bus ride home, he kept one hand on the envelope. He didn't look at it again. He didn't need to. He already knew this night was the start of something he couldn't yet explain. And tomorrow, he would finally understand why a billionaire who left a $0 tip had chosen him. Of all people. When he got home that night, the city lights were already glowing softly in the distance. The hallway to his apartment was quiet, just the steady hum of an old building settling into the night. He unlocked the door carefully, trying not to wake his child. But the moment he stepped inside, he saw a small head pop up from the couch. "You're home," his son said with a sleepy smile. He felt his heart melt a little. He set his bag down and pulled the boy into his arms. "Yeah, I'm home," he whispered. It felt like the first deep breath he'd taken all day. The boy had drawn something on a piece of paper crayon scattered everywhere, little shapes and stars filling the page. He held it up proudly. "I made this for you while waiting." The father smiled. "It's beautiful." He sat beside him for a while, listening to the child talk about his day, pretending not to notice how tired the father looked. Children always sensed more than adults realized. But tonight, instead of avoiding the heaviness inside him, the father felt something strange, almost like hope warming his chest. Later, After putting his son to bed, he sat alone at the small kitchen table. Only the quiet sound of the fridge filled the room. He reached into his pocket, took out the envelope, and placed it gently in front of him. He didn't open it again. Just looked at it, thought it didn't feel real. How could a man who didn't even look at him during the meal care enough to leave something like this? Why him? Why now? What did the billionaire want to say when he said he'd return tomorrow at noon? Questions circled his mind like slow-moving clouds. Eventually, exhaustion pulled him toward sleep. He washed his face, turned off the lights, and rested beside his child. But even as he drifted into dreams, his fingers brushed lightly against his pocket. Where the letter had been earlier, tomorrow would change something. He could feel it, and for the first time in years, that thought didn't scare him. Morning arrived gently. Sunlight pushed through the curtains and laid a soft glow across the floor. He woke up before his alarm, his eyes opening slowly as the memory of last night came back piece by piece. The notes, the envelope, the letter, the billionaire returning today. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The heaviness of life was still there, but today it felt different, lighter somehow, as if someone had peeled away a layer of worry. His son woke up soon after, rubbing his eyes. "Do you have work today?" "Yes," he answered softly, "but I'll be back early. Can we draw together later?" He smiled. Of course. Moments like that made every hardship worth it. He got ready quickly, wearing his cleanest shirt and tying his shoes tightly. Before leaving, he placed a cup of warm milk on the table and gave his child another note. "Be good. I'll be home soon." The boy nodded, giving him a small hug. As he stepped outside, the city felt unusually calm. People hurried around him, students rushing to school, shopkeepers unlocking doors, morning buses groaning along their routes. But he walked with steady steps, each one guided by a mix of nervousness and curiosity. By the time he reached the restaurant, it was still quiet. He unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and began preparing for the day. He wiped tables, counted utensils, checked supplies, routine tasks he'd done for years. But today, everything felt sharper, clearer. His coworkers arrived one by one, greeting him casually. "You're early today," someone said. He smiled faintly. "Just wanted a head start." What he didn't say was that he wanted to be ready for whatever the billionaire planned to say. Hours passed slowly. The morning customers came and went, workers grabbing quick breakfasts, elderly couples sharing warm pastries, students ordering cheap meals. He moved among them with his usual calm, though his mind remained half-focused on the clock. 11:45, 11:50, 11:55. His heart beat a little faster as noon approached. He stood near the counter, pretending to rearrange menus, but really he was watching the entrance. Every sound of the door opening made him turn slightly. And then just minutes after 12, Billionaire walked in, not dressed the same as before. No formal suit today, no assistant trailing behind him. Just a plain shirt, simple coat, and the look of someone trying not to stand out. The rest of the staff noticed, their eyes widening a little. But no one said anything. The billionaire looked around the restaurant before his gaze finally landed on the waiter. For the first time, their eyes met. There was no coldness, no distance, no arrogance, just a quiet understanding. The bill. Billionaire approached the counter slowly. "Do you have a minute?" he asked softly. The waiter nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. They walked to a quieter corner of the restaurant, away from the few customers who were eating. The billionaire spoke first. "I'm sure you have questions." "Yes," the waiter admitted, "but I don't want to seem ungrateful." "You're not," the billionaire said gently. "It's normal to wonder why a stranger would get involved." The man paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. I saw you weeks ago, he said. I came in late one evening. You were talking softly on the phone, trying to calm your child. You had your hand pressed against the wall like the whole world was sitting on your shoulders. The memory stung a little. He didn't like others seeing his struggles. I recognized that look, the billionaire continued, because I saw it on my parents' face every day growing up. The waiter blinked slowly. He didn't know what to say. Most people look at me and see wealth, the billionaire said quietly. Success, power. But before all this, I was a kid living in a small apartment, eating simple meals, watching my parent work long hours and still worry about rent. We barely had anything. Nothing came easy. He paused. I don't forget those days. I don't forget how it feels when no one sees your struggle. The waiter felt his throat tighten. That's why, the billionaire said, I wanted to help without putting you in an uncomfortable position. People judge kindness. Some call it pity. Others twist it into something ugly. I didn't want that for you. The waiter lowered his eyes. But why me? The billionaire smiled softly. Because you work with dignity, he said. Because even when someone is rude, you respond with calm. Because you greet every person with respect. Because I've seen workers treated terribly, and I've seen you handle it without breaking. The waiter didn't know anyone noticed. He always assumed he blended into the background. You keep going, the billionaire said. Even when it's hard. That deserves something. A soft silence grew between them. Then the billionaire added, the envelope won't solve everything, but it can give you space to breathe, and maybe help your child in ways you haven't been able to yet. The waiter nodded slowly. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, the billionaire replied. Just use it well. Their conversation ended not with dramatic words, but with a simple exchange, a handshake that carried more weight than either expected. The billionaire left quietly. Blending into the street outside, the waiter stood still for a few seconds, letting the moment settle into him. He wasn't dreaming. This was real. He returned to work, but everything felt different now. He moved with new energy, new purpose, new lightness. The envelope in his pocket felt less like paper and more like a doorway one he never expected. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't look dark. It looked possible. And everything began with a hidden note under a plate. The morning light slipped through the blinds of his small apartment, touching the edges of the living room, where his son lay curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that had seen too many winters. The room was quiet, except for the soft humming of the old refrigerator and the distant car horns from the street below. He sat at the small table near the window, holding the folded note he had found under the plate the night before. His hands kept turning it over, again and again, as if he expected the words to change. He still could not fully understand why someone as wealthy as that man would take the time to write something like that. The message had been simple, almost too simple. Your kindness is worth more than money. Come see me. Let me explain. And below it, the address written in neat handwriting. A place he had never been to, a street he had only heard about in stories, where homes looked like something from another world. He stared at the note, unsure if this was a joke or something else. Rich people played strange games sometimes. He had seen it before. A laugh at the expense of the person serving them. A challenge to see how far someone would go. He didn't want to be part of anything like that. But there was something in the man's eyes when he walked out of the restaurant. Something tired, something sad, something real. And he could not ignore that. He looked over at his son, still asleep. A part of him whispered that maybe the note could lead to something new. Maybe it could be a chance, even a small one. But another part of him, the older, wiser part that had been through too many disappointments, warned him to be careful. He tucked the note into his pocket, stood up. and walked toward the small kitchenette to boil water for the instant coffee he drank every morning. His days started early. He had work in 2 hours. There were bills to pay, school fees to manage, and the electric meter that always felt like it was counting too fast. While waiting for the water to heat, he heard his son shift behind him. He turned around to see the boy rubbing his eyes. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," the boy answered, his voice still sleepy. "Did you work late?" He nodded. "A little. But I'm here now." The boy smiled faintly, and that alone was enough to make the long night worth it. He placed a cup of warm milk in front of him, something he always did, even if money was tight. And for a moment, life felt normal again, just a father and his son at a small table, trying to start the day the best they could. But the note in his pocket kept pulling at his thoughts at work. He tried to focus on his tasks. He cleaned tables, carried plates, made sure customers were treated well. His coworkers joked around him, unaware that his mind was somewhere else. Every now and then, he caught himself touching the folded paper in his apron. Later, during his short break, he stepped outside behind the restaurant. The alley smelled of wet cardboard and old food, but it was quiet. He pulled out the note again and read it for what felt like the 100th time. "Your kindness is worth more than money." He wondered what kindness the man was talking about. He had only done his job. He had spoken softly, helped the man with his order, listened when the man asked small questions about the place. That was what he always did. He tried to treat people with respect because he knew what it felt like to be treated like you didn't matter. When his shift ended, he walked home, the cool air brushing against his face. He didn't take the bus this time. He needed the long walk to think. As he walked past small shops and old buildings, something inside him shifted. He couldn't let this go. He didn't know why, but he could feel it. This note, this strange moment, was leading somewhere. And even if it turned out to be nothing, at least he would know. That night, after making dinner and helping his son with homework, he finally sat down and took a deep breath. The note lay on the table between them. His son glanced at it. "What's that?" He hesitated. "Just something from work." The boy looked at him carefully. "Are you worried?" "A little," he admitted. The boy nodded, like someone much older than his years. "Sometimes good things come from strange places." He smiled slightly. "You think so?" The boy shrugged. "I don't know. But you always tell me not to say no to a chance." He felt a warmth in his chest. The boy was right. The next day, when he finished work earlier than usual, he stood at the bus stop, holding the note in his hand. He looked at the address, then at the traffic moving slowly in front of him. He didn't have fancy clothes. He didn't have anything to bring. He didn't even know what he would say. But he stepped onto the bus anyway. The ride felt long. The scenery changed slowly. The small shops turned into larger ones. The old buildings gave way to new ones, with shining windows and long driveways. He felt more and more out of place with each stop. When the bus finally stopped near the address, he stepped out and stood still for a moment. The street looked nothing like where he came from. The houses were huge, spaced far apart, surrounded by tall trees and quiet lawns. Birds chirped softly. There was no noise from traffic, no crowded sidewalks, no shouting vendors. Everything felt too clean, too quiet. He walked slowly, checking the numbers on the mailboxes, until he reached the one written on the note. He stood at the edge of the long driveway and looked at the house in front of him. It was big, but not in a showy way, more old-fashioned, with stone walls and wide windows. The kind of home that felt like it had many stories hidden inside. He hesitated before stepping forward. What if this was a mistake? What if the man didn't recognize him? Worse, what if this was some kind of prank? But he took a few more steps anyway. Before he reached the door, it opened. Standing there was the same man from the restaurant, the billionaire who had left a zero tip. He looked different. Now no expensive suit, no sharp expression. Just a simple shirt, sleeves rolled up, and eyes that looked tired but gentle. "You came," the man said quietly. He swallowed hard. "I wasn't sure if I should. I'm glad you did." The man stepped aside. "Please, come in." He hesitated, then walked inside. The house smelled faintly of old books and fresh coffee. The walls were lined with photographs, family photos, by the look of them. A younger version of the man stood smiling beside two children and a woman with kind eyes. "Thank you for coming," the man said again as he led him toward a small room that looked like a study. "I owe you an explanation." He nodded slowly, feeling both nervous and curious. The man took a deep breath and sat down. For a moment, they just stared at each other, one trying to understand, the other trying to gather the courage to speak. Finally, the man said, "I know leaving no tip was wrong. But there's something you don't know. And it's time I told you the truth." The room fell silent, and in that stillness, the story took a turn he never expected. The room stayed quiet for a long moment, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. He sat there, unsure of what the wealthy man was about to say, unsure of why he had been called to this place that felt so far from his world. The man across from him looked down at his hands, turning a small ring around his finger. There was something heavy in his expression, something he had been carrying for too long. Finally, the man spoke. "I didn't leave a tip because I wasn't thinking clearly," he said softly. "It wasn't about you. It was about me, and something I lost." He didn't interrupt. He simply waited. The man took a slow breath. "Years ago, I had a family. My wife and my son. We used to go out to eat all the time. My wife always left a tip, even when I forgot. She said kindness should never depend on mood or money. She believed in giving, even in small ways." He glanced at the photographs on the wall and understood. Those weren't just decorations. They were reminders. "One night," the man continued, "we were driving home after dinner. It was late. We were tired, and we never made it back." He swallowed hard, his voice tightening. "There was an accident. A bad one. I survived. They didn't." The room grew even quieter. For a long time, I couldn't feel anything. Not anger, not sadness. Just nothing. I stopped going out. Stopped talking to people. Stopped caring about simple manners, even tipping. He shook his head. "But last night, when you spoke to me at the restaurant, something felt different. You didn't treat me like a rich man. You didn't treat me like someone important. You treated me like a person. You smiled, even though I could see you were tired. You checked on me like you truly cared." The waiter lowered his eyes slightly. He didn't do those things for praise. He did them because that was how he wished the world would treat his son. "So when I got home," the man said, pulling out a folded paper from his pocket, "I realized I owed you more than money. I owed you honesty. And maybe something more." The waiter frowned slightly. "I don't understand." The man slid the folded paper across the table. "Open it." He hesitated, then slowly unfolded it. His breath caught in his chest. It was a letter. A formal letter. He read the first line. "We are pleased to inform you." His eyes widened. He looked up at the man. "What is this?" "It's a full scholarship for your son," the man explained, his voice steady. "Top school in the city. Transport included. Books included. Everything included." The waiter's heart pounded in his chest. He felt lightheaded. I don't know what to say." The man smiled weakly. "Say yes." He stared at the letter again. His son had always been bright, curious, full of dreams bigger than their apartment. But good schools cost money he didn't have. But why? He whispered Dot. The man looked toward a photograph of his own son. Because I couldn't save mine. But maybe I can help someone else's. The waiter felt something tug deeply inside him, an ache mixed with gratitude. And there's more, the man said, reaching for a small envelope on the table. This is for you. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. Inside was a check, a number so large he had to blink to make sure he was seeing it right. I can't take this, he said immediately, pushing the envelope back. I'm just doing my job, nothing more. The man gently pushed it toward him again. This isn't charity. This is recognition. For the kindness you show every day. For the patience you give people who don't always deserve it. For the strength you have raising your son alone. This is a thank you for reminding me what humanity looks like. He didn't know what to say. His throat tightened, and he blinked quickly to keep tears from forming. I'm not asking you to quit your job, the man added. I'm not asking for anything in return. I just want you to know that your small actions, they matter more than you think. The waiter sat back slowly. The weight of the moment pressed against him. He thought of all the nights he had worked double shifts. All the mornings he had walked his son to school half asleep. All the times he had wished for someone to notice, even a little. And now someone had. The man stood up. Come, I want to show you something. He followed him through the hallway and into another room. It was a large space with windows looking out over a quiet garden. In the center of the room was a framed picture, his wife and son smiling brightly. I keep this room exactly as it was, the man said quietly. I thought if I left it untouched, maybe the ache would lessen. But it never did. What did help, though, was seeing kindness in others. Like yours. The waiter looked at the photograph and felt something shift inside him, an understanding, a sense of shared grief, even though their lives were so different. You deserved a tip, the man said. But you gave me something better. A reminder that good people still exist. A reason to connect again. The waiter took a deep breath. Thank you for trusting me with this and for helping my son. The man nodded. He deserves a chance. And you deserve peace. They spoke for a while longer about life, about struggles, about how strange fate could be. The more they talked, the more the waiter realized that beneath the wealth, the man was simply a father who had lost something irreplaceable. Eventually, the waiter stood. I should go. My son will be waiting. The man nodded and walked him to the door. Before he stepped outside, the man said, If you ever need anything, advice, help, or just someone to talk to, you know where to find me. The waiter nodded. And if you ever want a quiet meal without being alone, you know where I work. They both smiled Dot as he walked down the driveway, the letter and envelope tucked safely in his pocket. He felt the cool breeze brush against his face. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a heavy load. It felt like a door-opening Dot when he reached the bus stop. He pulled out the scholarship letter again. His hands trembled with relief and hope. Dot at home. His son ran to him the moment he stepped through the door. You're early, the boy said excitedly. The waiter smiled. I have something to show you. He handed him the letter. The boy read it slowly, his eyes widening with each line. Dad, is this real? He nodded. It's real. The boy threw his arms around him, holding tight. Thank you. Thank you so much. He hugged him back, closing his eyes. No, this time. Thank someone else. That night, the small apartment felt warmer, brighter, like hope had finally found its way inside Dot in another part of the city. The wealthy man stood in front of his family's photograph. He touched the frame gently. Maybe this is a start, he whispered Dot, And somewhere in between those two homes, one small something invisible but powerful connected them. A reminder that even a moment of kindness can change the direction of two lives. The story didn't end with a zero-tip dot. It ended with understanding. It ended with healing. And it began a new chapter for both men, and for a young boy whose future had quietly shifted from uncertain to full of promise. Sometimes life gives back in ways you never expect. Sometimes all it takes is a hidden note under a simple plate.